There are stories in our culture that have been done to death. Other stories that have staying power, that we cherish and we read over and over again. That are the same version of the same story. But others we've read a bunch of novelizations of them. We've seen a bunch of film and TV adaptations. There are 3 film versions of The Grinch out there. There's heaven only knows how many Spider-Man movies, and we're probably going to get another reboot in the next 5 or 10 years. King Arthur is another one. It's like, frick, every 3 to 5 years we're getting another, we're going to do a King Arthur TV show. Like, really, is there anything else that we're going to learn about this character? And one such is, one such story, character, whatever you want to qualify that, is Robin Hood. In my lifetime alone, I was born in the 80s. I remember growing up with the cartoon version put out by the unnamed Empire of the Mouse. But then when I was in first grade or something, Robin Hood Prince of Thieves came out with Kevin Costner. A few years later, they parodied that. Robin Hood Men in Tights with Cary Elwes. Later in the early 2000s, there was a BBC TV show that ran for a couple of seasons. I didn't watch it. My wife got into it. I checked it out a couple of times. I'm like, okay, whatever, another Robin Hood story. 2010, Russell Crowe brought it to the big screen. I was like, okay, cool. The Gladiator guy. And I saw it and I was like, eh. All the basic bullet points were there. I forgot the one from just a couple of years ago with Taron Egerton and Jamie Foxx. The point is that, with movie studios in particular, it seems like anytime they want to make a quick buck, they'll throw together a Robin Hood movie. Even if it bombs, whatever, we've got it on the backlist. We can make residual royalties off of it over the next couple of years, and that's that. So with a lead-in like that, you might be wondering, like, what's Graham about to pitch to us? Well, I'm about to pitch to you a trilogy of hardback fantasy novels that are basically the Robin Hood story. Not like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, this is this particular author who I'm going to sell you on here in a second, writing the most historically possible version of Robin Hood. Stephen Lawhead, you can see the name right there, Stephen R. Lawhead. He wrote this trilogy called the King Raven Trilogy, Hood, Scarlet, and Tuck. Stephen Lawhead is an author from Nebraska originally. I'm not sure where he's living now. For college and for grad school, he went to Oxford in England and majored in Celtic studies. He loved the mythology, the lore, the culture, the history, all that stuff, and just buried himself in it. And as far as his noveling career goes, he's written a bunch of fantasy series. He redid King Arthur and Taliesin. He did a standalone novel that kind of fictionalized, but followed the actual events of the life of Saint Patrick, as a Roman Britannic citizen who was then captured by Irish slavers, and later his conversion and all that stuff. What were some of his other ones? He's done a series called the Song of Albion trilogy, which I'm sure I'll do a video on at some point in the future because it's just excellent. But now he's kind of writing his own fantasy series. I think he just finished one called Bright Empires. So he's very prolific and he's good at writing the thick fantasy books with the very rich details and the intriguing plots. But this particular trilogy was my introduction to his body of work, and it's what got me into his backlist. About 14, 15 years ago, I myself was on a big Celtic culture kick. I was listening to the music. I'd convinced myself, over there on my language shelf, I've got a couple of cheap courses on, like, oh yeah, teach yourself Irish, teach yourself Scottish Gaelic. I am not fluent in these languages. I'm barely proficient in them. I can read a couple of phrases here and there, but it's interesting. Most of my family is Midwest coal miner hillbilly types that came from Irish stock way back in the day, centuries ago. So I was interested in learning it for that reason, and that's what got me into his work here. But he starts out with this book Hood, and he's got the typical fantasy novel thing here where there's a map and everything. But right here you'll see that word there. Let me zoom in on it for you. Cymru. That is the Welsh word for Wales. He sets the story in Wales because it fits the geographical needs of what he's trying to explain here. And then as far as the time, he sets it in about 1080 to 1100 AD. There's a very particular reason for that. It's concurrent with the Norman conquest of other parts of Europe. So you've got invading tyrants, which is a key element of any Robin Hood story. foreign wars coming home, high taxes coming in, and the son of a local nobleman who kind of ends up in the wilderness for a while, gains some special abilities, and comes back to free his people from excessive taxation. Now, the reason why this trilogy is called King Raven, again, Lawhead loves the language, loves the history, loves the lore. He dives into the Welsh language, and he strings together this phrase, this name that could be very phonetically similar to Robin Hood. It's Rhibran y Hwd. Rhi means king, Bran means raven, y Hwd means the enchanter. And the roots for that are all tied very deep, steeped very deeply in the Welsh folklore. Why enchanter? Read the story to find out. Why was his name Bran? It's a common Welsh name. It does mean raven. Bran, King Raven. Who are the people that he's leading? Who end up being the merry men? How does Little John, Friar Tuck, how do all these characters fit in? Well, he doesn't hold back on that either. He hits all of the beats that you would expect to be there in a Robin Hood story, but he does so much more with it. Bran has, I can't even remember what he called her. She wasn't necessarily a witch, but she was this, Welsh mystic woman. Her name was Engerod, and she saved him from near death, brought him back with. I wouldn't necessarily quantify it as like magical powers. It's more of what you'd call magical realism, where there are loosely explained magical occurrences around him that might be real, might just be coincidental, might be part of the legend. It's not exactly defined, and that's kind of what gives it the allure. It's what makes his allies want to stay with him. It's what makes his enemies fear him. Does he actually have power? Can he turn into a raven and drop out of the trees in the thick forests of Elfale and drop in on our convoys and steal all our stuff? Or is he just a really well-skilled archer with loyal men that we can't seem to buy off? Lawhead plays that really well and writes it really well. I don't want to give away the ending of this book. The complete story is in the complete trilogy, so I will just say that the story leads into him forming the Merry Men and why he would decide to go to war against William the Conqueror, William the Red. And that leads us into Scarlet. In the original Robin Hood legend, we've got Will Scarlet, who was an illegitimate brother or a half-brother of Robin Hood, Robin of Locksley. In this one, Will Scatlack is his name. He goes by the name Scarlet. That's kind of his merry man name. It's given to him by King Raven. He gets captured, and he's kind of giving his last confession to a priest here, telling his story, and those are the chapters that are told first person, from Will Scarlet's perspective. I would say that this was probably my favorite book in the trilogy just because that first-person voice was a lot more rich, personal, charismatic. The third-person writing that you get in Hood and in Tuck is still very engaging, but there's something about Will Scarlet's voice that I find very admirable. He's an aspirational character. You read him and you're like, yeah, I kind of want to be like this roguish guy who's defiant in the face of the executioner's blade. And the plot to rescue him by King Raven and his allies is very good to behold. And then the trilogy wraps up very strong with Tuck. I paid full price for this book. It wasn't like I jumped on Amazon. Let me see if I can get a cheap copy. Like, no, this sucker was like $27, and I paid the full price for it the day it came out. I was very, very anxious to see how it all ended. On that note, I will say that the trilogy doesn't end maybe the way that you would expect for a Robin Hood story, but that isn't to say that it's done in a subversive way where the author's just throwing something together to say, oh, haha, you didn't expect that coming. Yeah, but it sucked. No, it wasn't a bad ending. It was a very, very strong ending. But again, sticking with the theme of being very historically possible based on the events of that time period and what was going on in that particular region, it makes perfect sense. This is one of those historical fantasy series where it's worth it to read the afterword at the end of each book, because there are decisions made in the plotting and everything that might not be completely palatable to a modern Western audience. And Lawhead explains why he did it that way, and you need, you know, a lot of historical details that aren't commonly known to fill out that story. The strongest afterword, I would say, again, you know, comes in Hood. He wrote a very competent first installment to this trilogy, and that's why I went on to read the rest of them. He gives the entire history of the Robin Hood legend. He explains, you know, with dates and everything, why did I do Robin Hood in Wales? Why did I set it in the years that I did? You know, he talks about where the legend probably originated and how it's changed over the centuries. You know, this is a story that's about 1,000 years old, and it's got its roots in different. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but, you know, different events, you know, throughout time. You know, Maid Marian wasn't in the original version of the story. Whoever the tyrant was, Prince John, whatever, that also changed based on who was in power. This is one of the more well-documented examples of a popular story that was changed to reflect, for lack of a better word, the politics of the time. You know, it's something that we still see to this very day. I mean, how many times in the last 10 years have you seen, you know, speaking from a U.S. perspective, our politics compared to the Hunger Games? You know, popular stories have the power to move real life events, and people try to use them to either reflect those events or change them. And, you know, Robin Hood is one of the greatest examples of that in Western literature. And Lawhead not only does the work of a really good storyteller and a really good fantasy writer, he does the work of a very good historian in this as well. So I would recommend that you know, when you pick up this trilogy, because I certainly hope that you will, that you take the time to digest all the information that he gives you in the afterwards as well. It was only about 8 or 9 pages, so it wasn't like, you know, here's the story and then here's a whole bunch of appendices explaining why I did it this way. He's not an overwriter. He's just a very rich, robust writer. So that's why I think you should read it. Content warning wise, Lawhead's a very clean writer. You know, profanity, I don't think there's anything worse than the word that you would use to describe somebody whose parents weren't married when they were born. No sensuality or things like that. Action violence, there are some gruesome battle injuries that are explained in a realistic way without it being overdone. You know, Bran, before he meets Angharad and you know, becomes King Raven, takes a spear to the chest, and the injury is described, again, not in excessive detail, just in realistic detail, because, you know, you kind of need to understand how dire this wound is and just what Angharad had to do to save his life and why he owes her. You know, there are other injuries described. You know, Will Scarlet takes some damage in prison. You know, he's got to do some fancy archery work at the end to save his own neck. And you know, so if that's a stumbling block for you, just be aware of it going into it. Whenever I do a book review, I like to do a content warning. But, you know, he's not sitting there, you know, cussing and getting into the bedrooms and the harems and whatnot. This is a story that stands very strong on the merits of its research and the craft of its author. So check out the King Raven Trilogy by Stephen R. Lawhead. Again, I'm going to hold these up for you so you can see. Hood, Scarlet, and Tuck. Beautiful series. I've read the first 2 a couple of times. I've only read you know, Tuck the once. I feel like it's one that you know, it's one of those series that some of the side characters kind of get a little bit bigger or get a little bit more to do, and so he takes time to tie up the different threads of the story, you know, as it all wraps up in the end. But because of that, there's not so much of a through line with the third book as there is with the first 2. Like the first book mostly follows Bran. Second book definitely mostly follows Will Scarlet. The third book, it relies a lot on Friar Tuck, but he's not the only character that gets a lot of the screen time, as it were. So check those out, and if you could, the usual YouTube rigmarole, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Big thanks to all of you who got me to 800 subscribers over this last month. I've got one home run video on my channel, and that's the one about the Mayflower passengers, and that's the main reason why I've decided to keep doing more videos like this, is because, you know, I want to provide good content for those that have, gone and subscribed and decided to stick around. So I hope you're liking it. I hope you keep sharing it. Tell your friends about it. And if you check out one of these books, leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. We'll get a discussion going. I'd like to keep doing this, and I'd like you to keep being a part of it. So thanks for checking this out. Hope you like the books when you read them, and see you next time.